Hello and welcome to another episode of Break Free B2B. I am Nick Nelson, content strategist here at TopRank Marketing, and we are going to have another conversation with leaders in the marketing space about ways to break free from the constraints of B2B marketing that might be holding us back. You know, where we like to talk to different people from different backgrounds, and today we're really excited because we actually have two guests on the show joining us. So we have Heather Hurst. She's coming to us from Vivint Solar, and she is the Senior Director of Digital Engagement there. We met Heather a while back. We had the opportunity to work with her at TopRank a little in her previous position at Workfront. And she was able to connect us with another person who's going to be joining us here on the show today, and that's Carol-Lyn Jardine. And she comes to us from Alteryx, which is an analytics platform, where she is the VP of Marketing Operations and Productivity. So welcome to the show, Carol-Lyn and Heather. It's great to have you on.
Great to be here.
We can just get started talking a little bit about your backgrounds. We'll start with you, Heather. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about where you got started and sort of what's led you to your current position.
I got started in marketing about 20 years ago, although I'm 29 years old, so do the math on that. I started off in agency working on a range of clients from B2B to B2C, and then slowly made my way into the corporate world where I've worked with a number of different companies from skincare to technology to now I work in the renewables, working in solar.
Awesome. Great. And how about yourself, Carol-Lyn?
So I am slightly older than 29, so I have been in marketing for a similar amount of time as Heather. I actually got my start in the PR kind of space, but quickly moved over into marketing. And almost the same time started working at technology companies. And I have been in basically B2B software since the beginning. So doing all kinds of different roles in marketing departments, including customer marketing, field marketing. I've launched ABM. I've worked in ops a bit and really kind of been all around the marketing department. And I have a special kind of place in my heart for productivity and making sure that we're all working and collaborating the best that we can inside of marketing and outside. So very excited about the last couple of years when I've been able to focus on operations and productivity.
Awesome. Very, very diverse background, especially collectively here. You know, change in marketing is a very common topic that I think we see talked about a lot. You know, I think pretty much every blog post about marketing these days seems to open up with something about how the world has changed and we need to adjust. But I think it's sort of perpetually relevant to people and really worthy of discussing from different perspectives. So, you know, change and managing change, I think is something that we really wanted to sort of zero in on with the two of you today. So I think it'll be a good discussion to really bring in sort of different views that you guys sort of have picked up along the way. Heather, we'll start with you. You know, as far as from your perspective, what do you kind of see from a high level right now that's changing, and what do you think are the sort of the most pressing, urgent changes that you're seeing in the industry?
Well, I think one of the big things, we talk a lot about trends in the way that we market and in the way that we bring, products to life. I think one of the elements that we miss a lot in that conversation is the impact that change has on the employees. Whether you are a new leader coming into a department or whether you're making another change, another shift within the organization, it's really, really important to help lead and manage a group through any change. And this is something Carol-Lyn and I are both really passionate about, is how do you how do you come in as a leader managing change, or how as an employee do you embrace change as well? So I think that's one of the biggest things that we overlook, especially with leadership in marketing can have a pretty quick turnover sometimes. And, you forget what the impact that can have to employees. So we were really excited at the opportunity to talk about that how you lead through change.
Yeah, absolutely. Carol-Lyn, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to go into new organizations a couple of times over the past few years. And one of the kind of consistent themes that I hear from especially employees is that they're unsettled by the amount of change that's happening in their organizations. And there's two things that happen to me when I hear that. One, I look at them and I think, wow, we work in technology. Why are we surprised that the change is happening, especially because I most often have been in growth companies where, we're always constantly trying to get to the next growth stage. So change is inevitable. And as I have kind of unlayered that conversation, what really comes out is that they're not necessarily saying that they're unhappy with change. What they're actually saying is that they're unhappy with how change has been rolled out. That's something in, kind of my position that I've really thought about is how do we roll out change? How do we help people understand why we're changing, what the impact of change is, and how those changes actually affect each individual employee? And are we being clear about that communication to help them see that vision?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, right? I mean, in this industry, we're all accustomed to change to some extent, but when it's in your organization and so close to you, it becomes a little more personal, right? So, there is a deeper emotional involvement with that. And I think it's interesting how you're really intertwined in the operational aspects, and obviously that's a big part of you guys' history working at Workfront, right? I mean, it's all about sort of finding these operational efficiencies. What do you see as sort of I'll start with you this time, Carol-Lyn. What do you see as sort of the signs of progress in terms of how organizations are generally handling change and sort of the frontier, a good direction for us to be moving here as we go forward?
Yeah, I think signs of progress that we're seeing is many ways. I'm always impressed with how fast people are getting to market with new ideas. So I think that's a good indicator that organizations are staying on top of change and they're coming up with new and innovative ways to solve their, the things that their business is going out to solve for. So I think that's one thing. Another thing that I am seeing is just the adoption of technology to help us get our work done. So, you spoke to Heather's and my background coming from a work collaboration platform. We had a front row view to thousands of customers who were implementing a new way of working or trying to upgrade their way of working. And the ability to adopt those kinds of collaboration tools and leverage technology to help us get more done more quickly, and more done more efficiently, yeah. I think are some of the indicators I'm most impressed with.
Totally. Now, Heather, you work in an industry right now, obviously, where change is sort of the name of the game, right? We're trying to change the way we use energy and become more efficient, change the way we, take advantage of our resources from the world. How does that sort of reflect in your day-to-day, sort of that purpose behind your company?
It's actually, it's a really encouraging place to be where we can absolutely see the impact of our industry on the environment and on our customers. It does also make from a marketing standpoint, it gives a lot of opportunity to move really quickly and to adjust quickly to change where we have changes in regulations, changes in incentives from the government. It rapidly escalates the way that we're able to go to market and the messages that we're putting out. It's also, while it's a 40-year-old plus industry, solar really has only come into its own in the last few years. And so it feels like a lot of category creation as well, where a lot of people don't really understand the way the technology works or the way it's installed. And so there's a lot of education and opportunity there to help people grasp, like, what is solar really doing for the world?
I think, category creation is such an interesting place for marketing because it really takes us back to the basics and fundamentals of education, as you mentioned. Are there any sort of insights or examples that come out of your work in that regard that you think would be maybe applicable for people in other areas when it comes to, because I think that, everyone should be trying to create a category to some extent, even if you're in an existing niche, find your own sort of unique angle or perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of things that have been really interesting for me, and I'm relatively new to the company. I've only been with the company for about 5 months. And I think that first 6-month period that you're with a company, you still have your new eyes, you're still looking at it through the lens of an outsider, which really helps you grab the opportunities a little easier. A couple of things that have been interesting for me are, and this happens everywhere, is when I talk to people who've been in the industry for a long time, they tend to speak as the industry speaks. Right. So they're speaking industry to industry rather than industry to consumer, which means things get lost. There's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of talking over where people will be in the knowledge cycle. There's just a lot of that forgetting the customer at times. And then there's also a ton of education needed. it's not that there's been misinformation. There just are a lot of elements that people don't understand about it, that we have this education piece that I think people tend to forget, that you have to come to the customer where they are in their knowledge. So whether they've done a ton of research, they know everything there is to know about your product or service, you need to be ready to meet them there. Or if they just woke up one day and said, I wonder what this thing is, I'm going to start Googling it, you need to be ready for that customer too. So that's been sort of an interesting viewpoint of it for me.
Awesome. Great stuff. So Carol-Lyn, you're working in a space that is not necessarily transformative in the same way as solar energy. I mean, analytics is something that is very central to digital companies and companies of all kinds, right? But there's clearly a lot of innovation happening in there. A lot of companies are very much behind the curve. So when you take something that is sort of more of a known concept and quantity, what do you guys do to sort of try to find a unique spin on it and cause people to think about it in different ways?
Do you know what? I think that it's an interesting place to be. I mean, data in general is an interesting place to be right now because while it is a known quantity, people are dealing with massive amounts of data that they actually don't know what to do with it in some cases, right? There's so much data that getting it into a usable place is the thing that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges for most companies right now. So, where we're at Alteryx is trying to help what we call the citizen data scientist be able to come to the table and be able to deal with these massive amounts of data in a very approachable and maybe less technical way than they've had to do it in the past. Things that we're taking data scientists thousands of hours to pull together with supercomputers, we can enable somebody who maybe isn't all the way to a data scientist in their ability to manage data. We can enable them to be able to do similar functions and similar analysis of giant data sets and complicated data sets in just a few moments to hours. So it really is changing the way that people have access to data and the way that they can look at it. So even though it's something that we've been dealing with for maybe a decade, because I don't think before that the amounts of data were as kind of crazy as they are now, we're definitely evolving the way that people can actually tap into their data and be able to look at it against other data sets. So I think that's actually a really big frontier when you think about it. Oh, yeah. And, I think that shows to the way that our company is growing and the space is growing in general, that people are recognizing that need.
So as we tie this back to this sort of theme of change management, I think, in any company, especially a large company, especially a company that's maybe dealing with, as you mentioned, huge quantities of data, it can feel very intimidating. And it can be a little scary to think about taking on a new solution or implementing something that's going to be so extensive, right? Do you guys have a strategy or sort of a viewpoint on how to communicate that message and sort of detract from the sort of overall just fear of big change? When
you have a big initiative for change, I think it always comes down to communication. And I know that sounds really simple. We're all marketers. We all know that. It's crazy how much we forget it though. So making sure that there's an actual communications plan that goes along with the change initiative, I think is really critical. And also, again, surprising how often there isn't one. So I think part of that communications plan has to be a level of messaging where every person affected by the change initiative understands what's in it for me. It comes back to that. People need to understand, why do I care about this change? How is it going to impact me? And what does it mean to my daily work? And then past that, they want to know how it's going to help the company achieve the company goals. I'm noticing that more and more, I don't really know if this is any different today than it's ever been, but I feel like people are talking about it more and more now, that they want to know that their work has an impact. So being able to take that, what's in it for me, and then translate it into how is my work making a difference, that's really key. And if we can make sure that those components are part of our messaging plan in any change initiative, I think we're going to be light years ahead of where we could be. So that's the number one priority for me when I'm starting out a change initiative.
And customizing that message to the different stakeholders and departments involved, right? I mean, it can't just be a blanket message. Yeah. Heather, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think when, number one, totally agree with Carol-Lyn that we often overlook communication. I think we also leave out groups of stakeholders. We forget that in any organization, big or small, you have employees, you have shareholders, you have your board, you have customers, and depending on the level of change, one of those groups will be left out. And, we always forget somebody. So including all of your key stakeholders in any communication of a change is important. I also think I'll echo Carol-Lyn on the employee side of things. I think we tend to forget that the first question that an employee is really asking is, how does this impact me? So we might roll out a big change. We've figured out this whole comms plan. The employees are excited about it from the perspective of the company, but really at the end of the day, they want to know, does this affect my job? Does this affect my compensation? Will I have some big organizational shuffle that I'm going to have to handle? And I think that we forget to speak to that level of what the employees are asking themselves, because I agree they want to see themselves in the bigger picture, but they also are really concerned with their place in the company, which often is either forgotten or we don't leave a door open for them to come and ask those questions.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about where we're seeing some progress and some positive movement, maybe in the industry and in this particular regard. Is there anything that stands out to either of you as sort of a mistake or holdup or a prevalent barrier that you're sort of encountering? And I'll start with you, Heather.
I think one thing that I've seen a lot of, and I think this is because through my whole career and probably all of your listeners' careers, there's been a lot of leadership change, whether that's at the executive level, at the marketing leadership level. Leaders tend to kind of come and go, especially if you stay with a company for a long time. One of the biggest mistakes I see new leaders making who come into an organization is that they forget that there was something that happened prior to their arrival. So they'll come in and they'll act like, today is day one of the company. We're going to run this show from here forward. And they forget that you may have tried things already, that you may have plans already, that you have a lot of big wins already. They don't give you the chance to celebrate. They don't give the chance to communicate. They just act like the world started when they arrived.
Yeah.
Which can just be such a huge, it's very demoralizing to the employees. And it makes that transition of a new leader really hard into a company. I think from a change standpoint, that's one of the biggest things that I would communicate, especially to leaders, is consider everything that came before you and ask a lot of questions, because otherwise the employees may not try to push it back to you if you don't ask, and you end up really hurting yourself and missing out on big opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, people aren't, with someone new that's coming in that they don't necessarily have the same established relationship and comfort level with, they're not necessarily going to be as forthright about telling you these things. So you really do have to ask those questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I had one role where not necessarily direct management, but some management over the marketing team. We had in 18 months, we had 5 different leaders. And so it was this constant reproving trust, re-explaining. But I think the reason that moved okay was that most of those leaders said, hey, bring me up to speed. Help me understand where you guys have been so that I can catch up to where you are.
Yep. That's well put. Well put. What about you, Carol-Lyn? Are there any sort of missteps that are standing out to you from your perspective?
There are, I think, kind of a flip on what Heather was talking about. She mentioned from the leader's perspective, how leaders need to be thinking about how they enter into a company. I would say let's take it from I'm getting a new leader perspective. Like I said, in the last couple of years, had the opportunity to enter 2 new companies in a leadership role. And while I've had fantastic people on my teams, one thing I wish that had been something they commonly did is onboarded me to their programs. Yeah. And I think, Heather's making the suggestion that we ask a lot of questions. I definitely took that tactic, but I wish that they had been just a bit more prepared for me to arrive so that I could quickly get up to speed on their successes, on their wins, on what the things are that are, working really well right now. So I don't have to go discover those, for myself on an expedition.
Yep.
And that enables us to move more quickly. So I'm more than happy to go on those expeditions with people, which is always a lot of fun. But I've a couple of times had people who were ready for me. And what that looks like to me is they have, a good rundown of what their programs look like, the KPIs that they're measuring to, how they're impacting the business. And usually they have a list of questions or a list of things that are working well and a list of things that are not necessarily going as well. And then in particular, a list of things that they would like my help on. And when I've had that, it has helped us move so much more quickly. And it's also helped them feel like I get their stuff better, right? And
Yep.
It's a much different experience than me having to come in and ask a lot of questions. So I think that's still an onus on me as a new leader coming in, is to ask a lot of questions. But I really appreciate that kind of preparation from the manager, director level coming up to a new leader. And it's something that I learned from somebody who did it for me. And now that's how I try and prepare myself when I get a new CMO. So
yeah, onboarding and setting new hires, especially those higher up hires up for success, is an area where, from what I'm seeing, I think a lot of companies could really stand to focus more and try to improve. So I appreciate you laying out what you've seen that's sort of working from your perspective. That's great. Now, switching gears a little bit, do either of you have any sort of personal beliefs or causes that sort of drive you professionally and maybe align with the work you do? Heather, I think in your case, there's an obvious sort of connection to sustainability and green living and stuff like that. But if you'd like to expand upon that or add to it in any way, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, that's been going from B2B tech, where there was a lot of passion for both Carol-Lyn and I when we were at Workfront around helping people work better and work more efficiently. That gave us a real purpose. It has been interesting coming into a business that the purpose and drive is just sort of laid out for you. When you look at pollution, when you look at the climate change, we're seeing that we can play a really key role in that. And it's interesting. It's been really fun and inspiring to be a part of a company that really does have a really good purpose behind it that's helping make change for the whole world.
Yeah, I think the purpose there speaks for itself. And, this is something we talk a lot about at our agency, the value of purpose and having something that you stand for beyond just making money, right? That's something that people care about today, especially as millennials are growing and taking over more of the workforce. So I'm sure that's definitely something that's sort of propelling you guys forward and that you try to really, really crystallize your messaging around.
Yeah, absolutely. As well as, we really listen to our customers and have a customer first methodology and mentality. So while not every customer goes solar because they want to help the world, that may not be their number one driver. That ends up being a really good reason for it. So we also speak to, people do it for a lot of other reasons, and how do we hit on each of those as well?
Yeah. And of course, every company, customers want to do business with companies that are at least trying and showing an effort in that regard.
Yeah.
What about you, Carol-Lyn? What sort of drives you in your career?
I have had really developed a passion around diversity and inclusion. And the main reason for that in my professional life is because I have found that teams with high levels of diversity, both in gender, in cultural backgrounds, in age, and across the gamut, when we build teams of diversity, we generally end up in a much more successful place more quickly than we do when we don't have teams with diversity. So that really drives me. I've definitely dived right into different women in leadership kind of programs, but most important to me is building those core teams around me in a diverse way. So you could ask a lot of people who sit on my teams, almost to a T, every company I'm at, people will say, you have got the most diverse team that I've ever worked with. And, that's something that I really enjoy, I thrive on, and want to help other people see the benefits of as well.
Awesome. So, with the theme of the show, of course, what we really like to do is try to rally around some sort of insight or recommendation that you guys are seeing as, a way to break free, a good sort of core focus to take forward. So kind of drawing from what we've talked about here and sort of the tenets of modern change management. We'll start with you, Carol-Lyn. What kind of stands out to you as the thing that rises above all else in that regard?
Yeah, when it comes to change management and kind of breaking free, I think a few things I would keep top of mind. one, assume good intent from the people around you as you're going through change behaviors. I always try and make sure that, when I'm going through these things, I assume good intent until I'm proven that I can't. But by and large, people don't disappoint me in that way.
Good. Heather?
I think going back to your purpose question a little bit, I think that we can tend to get really sucked into work. And one thing that I think we need to really consider as well, I will completely echo the good intentions piece from Carol-Lyn, but I think also considering how we spend our time either at work or outside of work and how that time aligns up to our values and where we want to spend time. I think that some people, especially in marketing, we can become workaholics a little bit. And so are we spending our time on our hobbies or our family or all of the places where we want to spend it? So we do become more, I think we're better rounded employees if we figure out, what do I value? And then what does that equate to in the way that I spend my time?
Yeah, I think that's, to me personally, that's so huge, having passions outside of work that maybe complement or relate in some way to it, but give you that sort of personal focus and, way to divert your energy towards something else. It is way too easy to get burnt out if you are solely focused on your work, right? I mean, I think we can all agree on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So just to sort of wrap things up here, we love to let people know how they could get in touch with you if they want to have a conversation or learn a little further about you guys' thinking. So Heather, we'll start with you. If someone wanted to get in touch, how would they go about doing so?
Feel free to reach out to me through any social media channel, through LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm Hurst. Or feel free to email me, heather.hurst@vivintsolar.com.
Awesome. What about you, Carol-Lyn?
Probably easiest for me is LinkedIn and Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm CL Jardine.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. Honestly, the time has flown by. Really, really awesome to hear you guys' perspectives on these things. Love bringing your background into this. Is there anything else you guys would like to add here sort of before we depart? Any parting thoughts?
No, just good luck with all of the change, everybody. It's never going to stop. So at some point we embrace it.
Yeah,
embrace the change.
The only thing that will not change is change itself, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks a lot to Carol-Lyn Jardine and Heather Hurst for joining us on Break Free B2B today. We'll be back at you guys again soon with another conversation and keep on breaking free, I guess. Everyone have a great day. Thanks, guys.